Hey there, welcome everyone to another episode of the RocketMSP Podcast. I'm Steve Taylor, your host, and today I am joined by Tas Gray. Tas, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here. Appreciate the
Absolutely.
opportunity to come on.
Absolutely. So, let's see. I think people are probably wondering, why are you doing this so late in the day? Because for you, you're actually from the future.
I am indeed.
So I'm in Ohio, which goes by like New York City time zone, and you are in
Melbourne, Australia, which
Melbourne,
is
Australia.
plus 10 GMT.
Is it only 10?
Only 10. We were 11 until
we're -4, so yeah, that makes sense. That you're about, so it's 7 in the morning there, right?
it's 7:04.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Have you had your coffee? This is going to be fun.
That's all I've done today.
That's all you've had time for, I suspect.
Yeah.
You're like still at home. You got your Axiom IT shirt on, and then like your boxer shorts down below, right?
More or less, yep. I didn't sleep.
We're not
going
to confirm. We're not going to confirm.
Put that on when I woke up.
All right. Well, Tas, you are with Axiom, and you are an IT consulting company. Well, not you personally. You're an IT consultant. Axiom is an IT consulting company. Can you tell me a little bit about you and your company before we dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're what I would call a managed service provider, I suppose, and we obviously do consulting along with that. But we are based here in Melbourne, Australia. We're a smallish sort of team of, I think we're about 8 people now, and we've been going along since 2011. So this is year number 10 for us, and we've got a pretty strong alignment with Microsoft 365 and Microsoft in general. So that's more or less what we do, where our focus sits. We've got an interesting mix of clients, and it's there's never a dull moment really.
Very cool. So, is it weird thinking that 2011 is a decade ago?
It's a little bit scary because it feels like it was only yesterday that we started this thing, but
Right?
yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
That's what they tell me. So so with you doing this for about a decade, you said that you are deeply ingrained in the Microsoft 3, you call it 365. We call it 365. I guess, I mean, do either of us have to be wrong? Like, can't we both just be right here?
I think we can agree to disagree on that one.
Oh dear. Okay. So
we're talking about the same thing, so I think
we
we're
are.
good.
We are.
Yeah.
So with you using Microsoft 365, I mean, okay, so you use like hosted Exchange and OneDrive and maybe some Teams like that. Everyone does that. So I don't see the big deal with bragging about Microsoft 365.
Well, yeah, no, you're right about that. I think most people are doing it. I guess where I see us as being a little different is that that's all we do. So we're very selective about the technologies that we use now, and for good reasons, I believe. But we don't have any clients that are on the Google Suite or have their own Exchange servers, which is, I'm quite grateful for that given recent events, of course. and no other funny stuff like Lotus Notes, Kerio, any of that other stuff that you might come across. So
I haven't heard Lotus Notes in over a decade.
I'm sure it's still out there somewhere.
I hope not.
I do feel for those people. But yeah, look, to tell you a little bit about myself, so my MSP was not my background, and I actually got into MSP after doing maybe 6 or 7 years in .NET development. So I've always been quite Microsoft focused, but previously it was in software development. And at some point I decided that software development as a career for me just wasn't what I wanted to do. And of course, being that guy that knows how computers work, particularly back, I guess, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you were always called upon to fix things when they broke. And we're talking about pre-iPads and iPhones and that era when everyone had a Windows computer at home and all that kind of thing. So I was already kind of somewhat involved in tech support as a bit of a side hustle, I suppose you would say. And I guess back around 2010, 2011, decided to have a go at setting up a business, and quickly had to learn about being an MSP and what that involved, because it was not something I'd ever done before.
Interesting. So, when you looked into being an MSP, I guess here's where I get a little nervous. I'm worried for your customers, Tas, because you say all you do is Microsoft. Are you telling me that you don't do like Sophos, antivirus and endpoint protection, or Bitdefender, or any of these other like antivirus solutions?
So we had done in the past we were we were using WebRoot quite heavily, and that worked pretty well, we thought. Certainly we were probably pretty lucky. I don't think we ever had a crypto on one of our clients, which was maybe a little bit of good planning and a little bit of good fortune. But at this point in time now, we do have some legacy clients hanging around that still are on the WebRoot product. But for newer clients and clients who are on our cloud stack, we absolutely do not use WebRoot at all. We use the Defender endpoint protection that Microsoft provides us with Defender ATP, and we've found that to be pretty good.
Okay, so Defender ATP, that's the part I'm nervous about.
Well, tell me what makes you nervous about that, Steve?
Well, I mean, I just, all my IT buddies, they all tell me that Defender's bad. So, I mean, I just have never used it because everyone tells me it's bad. So why would I use it?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that, because in my experience, we've found that it's actually been quite effective. So, but if I'd love to understand a bit more about why they would say that.
Well, when you look at, all the tests from 13 years ago, and you compare Windows Defender, the one that comes on, Windows 7 Home, versus a product like Sophos endpoint protection with EDR, the Sophos just wipes ATP or just the regular old Windows Defender off the chart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just, obviously Defender sucked. So 13 years ago, so it can't be good now.
Well, look, 13 years ago things were very different, of course, and I dare say it's improved since then. But I guess the key thing is the ATP add-on that really is where a lot of the goodness starts to come out. So I guess in my experience over the last 10 years and having worked or run an MSP for that time, I could be naive in thinking this, and however, I believe that the endpoint is not really the target so much anymore like it used to be. Crypto was really a big thing for a while there, but now what I've seen and what I think is more important to protect is the online identity. So that for us, that's the 365 account. To me, that's where most of the bad actors are targeting users and trying to, of course, phish them and lure them into handing over their credentials, which once they get in, they can start to do the social engineering type stuff and extract money out of companies through falsified invoices and things like that we've all come across. To me, that's the biggest risk. The endpoint, of course, is still important. You don't want that to be compromised, but I don't feel it's quite as targeted as it once was. Not to say that you don't need good endpoint protection, and certainly not saying that Defender ATP is not good endpoint protection.
Interesting. Okay. So you're right. Most of the attacks aren't really attacks as much as they're gotcha, like they're just trying to trick people into giving over credentials or signing checks or whatever, right? You get the fake invoice from the fake company that's not actually up the street, but they say they are, so obviously you should pay the invoice. Mm-hmm. I guess you're right. It's much more about manipulation these days than it is about sending someone a virus. Not that the virus stuff doesn't happen, because obviously there's stuff out there like all this ransomware stuff and getting your stuff encrypted.
I mean, obviously, you hear about, I think it was Garmin last year that had the ransomware attack that took them offline for quite a significant amount of time, and I'm sure there have been others recently that I can't think of. But look, in my view, the average small business now, ransomware is not the problem that it once was, because at least in the case of our clients, the majority are on using Teams or SharePoint, and which, well, same thing in a lot of ways, and OneDrive. Most of the data sits in the cloud. They've moved away from the network drive, so there's no risk of that being encrypted. And not that I've ever seen it happen, but if you did have someone syncing a SharePoint library and it got encrypted, it wouldn't be difficult to roll that back. Potentially Microsoft can do that for you. If you're using 365 backup, you can roll it back. So it's almost a non-event, really. And it's certainly not the sort of thing that keeps me up at night, that whereas 5 or more years ago it possibly could. So I really don't think that threat exists anymore in small business, really.
Okay. So one of the other things that we kind of discussed is, again, you are 100% cloud-based and you're 100% Microsoft 365. So with that being the case, you don't have clients with like domain controllers in the office, do you? Not really. We do have the odd one here and there. So there are some clients who still need that through a couple of, usually on-premise line of business software that they can't get away from, or you do get the odd business like an engineering firm or an architecture firm where they're dealing with large files and they need that local file storage and so on. But I could probably count on two hands the number of servers that we've still got out there. But ignoring those, we've got our ideal setup is really just the Microsoft 365 Business Premium E3 or E5 full stack, and doing that with Azure AD joins and Intune for endpoint management, and just making full use of that 365 stack. Now you said Intune for endpoint management. Are you also using some type of RMM tool like ConnectWise, Automate, Manage, whatever they call that one, or Autotask RMM, Data RMM, or whatever?
We do. We're unfortunately we're not at a point where we could do away with that yet. So we still have Kaseya, which we make use of for things like patching and the ability to run scripts on endpoints and things like that. But yeah, it's increasingly becoming less relevant. But at this point, I would say you still need that.
Yeah. All right. Now, you said that your ideal environment 365 with Azure AD joins. So let's take a minute to talk about that, because there are a lot of people who, quite honestly, are scared or intimidated. Maybe that's a better word for it, but they're very intimidated by just the sheer thought of trying to figure out how to join a computer to Azure AD. So can you kind of walk us through, like, I know you're probably not technical these days. You're probably more focused on managing the business than managing the tech. So are you able to walk us through, like, big picture, what does it look like to walk in, set up a new client of yours that has existing computers, and set all of these computers up on an Azure AD network?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, so our process looks kind of like this. So if we were to pick up a new client and they weren't already Azure AD joined and sort of been cloud managed, we would have to go in there and do all of that. And essentially that process involves, if it's domain joined, you'd have to pull it off the domain. If it's not, then you just join it straight onto the Azure AD domain. You do have to create a new Windows profile to do that. There are tools out there to migrate profiles across, but I can tell you in our experience that that's just always been problematic. So I guess one tip I'd have for people is definitely just steer clear of profile migration. It just does, it'll trip you up at some point. So you're better off creating a new one. And that's really all there is to it, Steve. You Azure AD join the machine, and then really that's step one. Having Intune manage the device is step two, and that's probably where most of the complexity lies. And I think probably where a lot of apprehension exists for people who are not really up to speed with this stuff yet, and who have come from the more traditional group policy domain join approach. It is different, and there is learning involved, and it's it takes time and it's effort, and understand why people are not always keen on doing that. But in my opinion, it's well, I'd say it's the future, but it's not. It's the here and now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Okay, so what type of stuff are you guys doing with Intune? Like, are you doing the type of stuff that people used to do with the domain controller, like, group policy and setting up new printers and like that type of stuff, where you're doing a lot of the automation and security management? We
do some things. Printer management is an interesting one, because without a print server on-prem, it can be that's a bit more challenging than it used to be. Mm-hmm. There are SaaS-based solutions out there to deal with that, but for the most part, we just run a script to map the printer, and that takes care of most things. But you do miss out on a bit of the niceness there. But as far as what we do, I'd say, similar things. So we set wallpaper and restrict things and lock the machines down to a certain extent. But then on top of that, what we're doing is we're able to do a lot more in terms of device management. So where group policy traditionally would look after the Windows devices, Intune allows you to look after Android and iOS devices as well. So all of a sudden, you've got a lot more power to secure people's devices, even if they're not company owned. And what I find in discussions with clients is that if they haven't really even thought about this, once you have that chat with them and you bring their attention to the fact that they've got staff with personally owned devices, their smartphone essentially, sometimes computers as well, but they're accessing work resources, and someone's got an iPhone or Android phone, it's connected to Teams, it's connected to work email, they've essentially got a way into all the company data, and these things can be lost or stolen, and the company doesn't really have any way of knowing, is that device secure or not? And they don't really give that any thought until it either happens or until you sit down and discuss it with them. So the great thing about Intune is that you can manage all of these things, and you can keep this data secure on devices that are personally owned, that the company didn't issue, without sort of having to take ownership of the device and be too intrusive for the staff member. So to me, that's a brilliant selling point of just the whole M365 story, and the power that you've got in your hands with that, and definitely clients appreciate that. And I would say over here in Australia, there's not a lot of people doing that at the moment. So it does, I guess, provide a bit of a niche for us in a lot of ways, because the people out there who are looking for that have a hard time finding it in a lot of cases.
So for those of you watching Wednesday night, afternoon, Thursday morning, whatever it is, if you're watching it live right now, depending on where you are in the world, feel free to pop some questions in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Especially Facebook. I'm curious if the Facebook chat is coming through into StreamYard, because this is my first attempt at doing a Facebook integration with it. So yeah. So I guess I just want to kind of recap what I've heard so far. You're using 365, either business premium or higher, I'll say, when it comes to the licensing. And I'm pretty sure business premium and E3 are just really close. The business premium just has that 300 user cap, right?
Yeah, so E3, actually, Steve, just excuse me one sec. I'm going to close the blind. You can probably see the sun coming up, and it's right in my eye.
Quick, guys, now's your chance. I don't know for what, but do it.
Sorry about that. I can actually see again.
No problem.
All right. So the business premium E3 it's an interesting situation there, because they did end up putting a lot into business premium. If you recall, not maybe 6-12 months ago, business premium didn't contain Azure AD P1, which left out a lot of the good stuff. But when they put that in, it actually, I'd say it became better than E3, because you got Azure AD P1, but you also got Office 365 ATP, which is now called Defender for 365, I think. Whereas E3, you don't get that. But where E3 has a place is for those clients that do still have the server on-prem. You do get the Windows Server Cal with the E3 license. So that is one of the benefits over Business Premium. But outside of that, there's the 300 user cap, and that's really it.
Got it. Okay. So to recap, you're using business premium or higher for pretty much all of your clients, and when you bring on a new client, your goal is to migrate them away from like a local server domain and migrate them to Azure AD. In the process of doing that, like, you gotta set up Azure AD, I'm sure. that probably so Azure AD, that's integrated with the Microsoft 365 though, right? So you set up all the email address, all the accounts, and it's done, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, not
And
quite.
okay.
That's the user provisioning done, but the configuration of the tenant, of course, is another process in and of itself. So that, just I guess going back to what I was saying earlier, and my background in software and so on. So the thing that I really liked about 365, and I don't know if you were around at the time when it sort of hit the scene, Steve, but over here in Australia, there was a lot of resistance to 365, and there was probably two reasons for that. The first one was that you could only buy Office 365 in Australia from a company called Telstra. Telstra are like the national telco here, and there was a lot of I guess in our industry, Telstra was almost like a dirty word, and you just, no one wanted to touch Telstra, so that didn't bode well for 365 in the early days. But then also being new and cloud, as you would probably know, a lot of people in our industry a little bit adverse to change, and that's for good reasons, of course. But so it didn't really get picked up all that heavily at the start, but the customers who sort of knew about it and got onto it thought it was the greatest thing ever. So there was a market for it, and at Axiom we were sort of straight onto it. We just jumped right in, and the reason for that was largely because I just thought, as a concept, it was brilliant. It was just such a good idea, because I hated the idea of having to have a server in a small business with maybe half a dozen staff. This idea that you needed a server to run email and file sharing and things like that, to me, just seemed ludicrous. And it felt like, even 10 years ago, that there had to be a better way. And there were things around back then like Dropbox and G Suite or Google Apps or whatever. I'm not sure what it's called these days. But so the idea of cloud was it was there, but it didn't really exist in a business context. Anyway, why am I saying all this? So the thing that I thought was brilliant about 365 was that it was exactly the same thing for every customer. And me coming from a software development background, that meant that I could look at this thing in a way where I could start to really scale it, because I could write scripts or code to integrate with it, to do things with it. And if I wrote it for one client, I'd effectively written it for every client. So the scalability and performance of that was very appealing to me. So I guess fast forward now, the product's developed. It's moved from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. It's looking after device management. It's doing really good things with identity and security. But to your question now, in terms of setting up a tenant to what I would call the Axiom gold standard or best practice, that there's a lot of work involved in doing that. There's a lot of portals that you've got to go into to configure. There's a lot of policies you've got to configure. And doing that manually would be a difficult process. It would be time consuming, certainly not impossible, but it would be prone to human error. Consistency would be challenging, and I just don't think you would be sensible to do it that way or scalable. So with my background in software, we've been able to automate that process to a large extent, through Graph API and PowerShell scripts. So our process to set up a tenant now, where we get it from nothing to quite highly secure, is really just a matter of importing and exporting JSON through a bunch of Graph APIs. And that now is a process that we've got down to about probably 2.5 hours from originally probably 10, 12 hours, something like that. So our ability to production line this environment is really, really, really good, and it means that it's quite a profitable process for us too, because we do charge the client a substantial amount of money to onboard them. We don't charge them by the hour for that. We just give them a fixed cost, which they can afford, and obviously the more efficient we become, the more profitable that becomes for us. So
Sure.
I guess to me that's one of the real key benefits of going full Microsoft 365 is the ability to do that.
So when you purchase a new computer, are you purchasing it with, I don't remember what they call it, but you can purchase it where they load the profile stuff from 365 onto the computer?
So what the technology you're talking about there is autopilot?
Yes, that's what it's called.
Yep. So yeah, we do. It's the distributors now in Australia are enabling us to do that, which is great. So yes, when we order new machines, they give us the autopilot hashes or I think that's what they're called, and yeah, we load those in, and yeah, the machine is more or less self deploying.
That's amazing. So, what does that process look like when you're doing autopilot? Is it you giving the distributor information, or is it the distributor giving you information to enter into 365?
They're giving us the information. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can obviously, if you can give the so one way of doing it is that you get, say, Dell or HP to load those hardware IDs into the tenant for you, but they obviously need access to the tenant to do that. And the other way is you can get the distributor to actually take the computer out of the box, run the bit of PowerShell on it, get the hash or hardware ID, whatever they call it, and then we get that in an email, and we load it in, and that's the end of the process. Very straightforward.
Okay. So, I'm just looking at my notes here. Are there any other things that you guys do to like standardize your product and service stuff that you're doing? Like, because it sounds like you're doing a lot of things right. I'm not going to say you're doing nothing wrong, because I haven't heard that much. But it sounds like you're doing a lot right, where, you know, you're saying, I just don't want to take on clients that don't meet these criteria. You know, we want to avoid servers, we want to avoid G Suite, et cetera, right? And then because you've got that software background, you are, I would say, more than just proficient at writing PowerShell and other types of scripting when it comes to allowing you to automate what you're looking to do. So it's not just the PowerShell. Now you're able to get in and do the JSON code editing and that type of stuff to really help you dig into the Graph API and take all that power, you know, by the horns and use it, you know, to your benefit. So what other stuff are you doing to kind of standardize your delivery, your delivery?
If I go back 5 years or so and talk about what Axiom IT was like back then, so we were 5 years into the game, and coming into this industry with no real experience as an MSP, we started with no clients, and so we had to take whatever we could get, right? And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And it took us a long time to get to a point where, you know, we were comfortable revenue-wise, and it started to get a bit easier. So, but in order to get to that point, we had to say yes to a lot of things that today I wouldn't say yes to. And while it was all revenue, it was all money, and it was all great, what I discovered at some point was that once we started to throw staff into the mix who hadn't been with us since day one and didn't understand the nuances of all the different clients and why they were set up differently, and, you know, all those complexities, it all of a sudden became a lot more difficult to manage, because I wasn't doing it anymore, my business partner wasn't doing it anymore, and that knowledge just wasn't there. And so I realized that in order to scale an MSP and not end up in a huge mess where you start to drop the ball in terms of service delivery and things don't get done properly and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure we've all picked up a client from an MSP where you just look at it and think, what on earth happened here? It's just, this is not right. And you sort of know that, you know, it's somewhere along the way the MSP just kind of just dropped the ball really. And that was a big concern for me. I never wanted to be that kind of person, or not service a client properly. If we can't service them properly, we need to let them go, has always been my view. So anyway, we ended up with this sort of hodgepodge of different setups and things like that. And as I was saying, new staff members, it was very hard to bring them up to speed on that. It would take 6 to 12 months before they understood it. And staff retention, you want to hang on to people, but obviously they turn over, and then you start that process again and again and again. So what I've learned is that standardization is the key to scaling, because you want your environments to all look the same, and you want them to function more or less the same way. Now, there's obviously nuances with every client that you need to address. Yeah. But if you can do that in a way where the bulk is the same and it's just a little bit of tweaking on the edges, then you have we use IT glue to document all these things, so that the help desk team and the techs know where to look for that information. But standardization is the key, right? So what we did is I think it was about 3 years ago when Microsoft announced that Microsoft 365 was a product. Prior to that, it was you needed it was EMS together with 365 and so on, but the story didn't quite fit together entirely without the Azure AD join. So it was, I don't know when it happened over there, but we had an Ignite tour or something like that over here where they announced it. It was massive news. I was like, finally, this is the missing piece of the puzzle is here, which is the Azure AD join piece, which meant that all of a sudden the domain controller was no longer needed, in a lot of circumstances anyway. And so what we did is we went off and we decided, okay, this is it now. We're going to go full tilt on this. And so we redid all of our managed service offering to be completely focused on the Microsoft 365 offer. And it was really pretty simple in terms of how we tier it. Like I said earlier, we start with Business Premium, E3 and E5. Obviously, you get more security as you move up the stack. Mm-hmm. And away we go. So that's been the best decision I've ever made in this business, because it's very easy to sell that. And so, and I'll tell you a bit more about how we do it. So within our product, which we call it Axiom Cloud, we have essentially 4 different types of users. So we have what we call it just an Axiom Cloud user, who's your full desktop user, has everything. Copy a license, mm-hmm. We manage the desktop, we manage their mobile devices, backup, all that kind of stuff. We then have a light user, which is essentially what you would give to, say, like a board member or someone who uses their own machine, and they basically just get web-based access into 365. And then we have mailbox only, which is pretty rare these days, but that's just an exchange license with a bunch of security on it. And then we have what we call our secure shared mailbox SKU, which is basically just a shared mailbox, but again, we do a little bit more to secure it, and we charge a fee to back it up and manage it. They're the 4 offerings we have within our managed service. So it's really simple. We don't have to try to work out licensing or licensing strategies on a client by client basis. It's all kind of predefined, and which means for the people working on the help desk, it's very easy. They know what sort of user the person is when they ring up. They don't have to think about the licensing. That's all taken care of for them. And when it comes to quoting, it just makes quoting just so much easier, because you'll obviously have a sales discussion with the client. You'll work out, do they fit? We have the 3 different plans. We call it Basic, Essential Security, and Security Plus. Once you've worked out where they fit, how many staff you got, have a quick look in the tenant, how many shared mailboxes have you got, that kind of thing. Put the quote together. It's all fixed cost. It takes 5 minutes to put that quote together. We use Proposify for quoting, and bang, done. They sign it, away we go. And so then over to service delivery, they know exactly how many users there are, what types of users, all that kind of stuff. It just makes that process end to end so much smoother.
Very cool. Now, trying to formulate the words. See, this is hard for me. Like you know, it's the beginning of the day. You're sharp. You know, you got it all. It's working, right? For me, it's like, oh, it's, you know, 5:45. You know, dinner starts 45 minutes ago. Don't worry. I've got plans tonight. I'm gonna go get wings with some guys. It's gonna be
Nice.
so good. Don't worry. I'll wear my mask and all that. So. Yeah, Eric says need help. So, all right, let's talk more about the security portion of your offering. So you said you're doing ATP,
Yes.
and that seems cool. You know, it's cool that it's, you know, you're using the full Microsoft stack. So let's talk about what ATP does and what ATP doesn't do. So first, let's just start at the endpoint. Does it do anything to protect the endpoint?
So obviously, Defender ATP just and well, let me give you my understanding of how this works, and I'm not across the technicalities like I used to be, so I could be a little wrong here, but so forgive me if I am. But Defender ATP is simply Windows Defender. That's the engine that runs on the workstation that does its thing. The benefit of the ATP is that you get the analytics and behavioral analysis on top, and it feeds through back into the cloud and does, I guess, more advanced things than what you would get with just your regular ATP. Your regular Microsoft Defender. Now, where I was really sold on the Defender ATP story is that if you get a threat, say you get a file that comes in that's malicious, that gets downloaded onto a workstation and executed, you can actually see the whole process of where that file entered the environment through, because it's come through 365, obviously. So you get that traceability and visibility back up to the cloud as to where it came from, what it did on the machine, and it gives you quite a good visual representation of the you know, how that threat took place. Having that all within the same platform is obviously better than having set different products, because you can't. It's a lot harder to track that across, you know, the different vectors, if you like. So that's where I was sold on that. Obviously, the other thing that I like about Defender ATP, and this ties in with our model too. So one thing I didn't mention is that the way that we sell managed services, we do it on a per user basis. So we don't try to do the device type. You know, you're the CEO and you've got a laptop and you've got a computer at home and you've also got a computer in the office. That's 3 devices. We've got to charge you extra for that. You still there, Steve? Actually, there's a lot of background noise that just went away.
Oh, okay. Let me turn. I got a fan on because I'm a smart guy. Because I'm dying in here, and I didn't think about all the noise it's doing. So
yeah, there you go.
I bet all that noise went away, didn't it?
It did.
Oh,
I think
wow,
you made a few people happy.
Oh boy.
So as I was saying, so we tried to move away from that pricing, just because, one, it creates more admin, and I'm not a fan of admin, and it's just simpler for the customer. Just how many users you got. We don't care how many devices you've got. We'll sort of look after them all. And I guess the thing I liked about Defender is that Defender is per user licensing, so we don't have to. Whereas if we went to a third party like Sophos or Webroot, we're paying per endpoint, which, you know, it's not a big amount of money, but it does erode away at that profitability.
Do you have a lot of clients that have more than one device?
Yeah, increasingly we're seeing that. Particularly, you know, with COVID, a lot of people set up a second device. They had, you know, they'd have one in the office, or they'd have a laptop, and then they had a desktop as well. So
Gotcha.
yeah, devices are just becoming more ubiquitous, and then of course you've got mobile devices. People have iPads, things like that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, let's keep talking about what ATP is able to do for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about the desktop. Let's talk about OneDrive. Does it do anything in OneDrive? Like beyond the desktop, like in the cloud?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay. What about email? Are you doing anything to protect their email?
Yes. So the other ATP product is the Defender for 365, and of course we use that for the anti-phishing, anti-spam, anti-malware functionality that provides, as well as probably the big ones that we well, the things that I like there are safe attachments, which does that secondary scan of the file. I think it opens it up in what they call a detonation chamber, and monitors the behavior of the file just to make sure it's not doing anything malicious. And then obviously once it's approved it lets it through. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Steve. You're looking a bit. Yeah, no, you are good. Okay.
No, I'm looking up. Eric is screaming in the chat. Yes, it can. And I very quickly Googled something. I've got screens everywhere, right? So
Gotcha.
it appears as though Defender will basically do like safe attachments for SharePoint, OneDrive, and even Teams.
Yes. Is that Defender the endpoint, Defender for endpoint, or is that the Office 365 or Defender for 365?
Defender for Office 365, Plan 1 and Plan 2, and then Microsoft 365 Defender.
Yep. So
maybe that's the difference. So the ATP isn't doing anything. It's just the other part of Defender. I just assume that they're all the same thing. I don't know. It's very confusing, all this Microsoft stuff. They've got they have like 97 things that come with 365, and I don't even know all the things. Like
I mean, you've got to stay on top of this stuff, and that's challenging. But the other thing too is, of course, they tend to rename the products with somewhat regularity as well, so that doesn't help either. But it's just part of the job.
So yeah, I see. Eric says ATP is both 365 and Defender ATP for the endpoint. So that's apparently all the things. He said he's going to throw himself into his new smoker. I think we've offended him. And it's a really nice smoker. Like, this thing came on a pellet. Like, I don't know. They must have like freight shipped it to him. It looks pretty sweet.
Yeah.
The cool thing is, I think it's big enough it could fit him. So maybe he'll do us both a favor. I don't know. I'm teasing Eric just because I'm having Eric on tomorrow as a guest, and I have no idea what to expect. He and I go back and forth a lot. I just have no idea what to expect, so I'm getting them in now while I can.
Very nice.
All right, so ATP. Did I ask you if it does the email stuff?
Yep.
On ATP? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I think that does it protect your Mile IQ? Like what else does Defender protect?
So, well, I guess email's one of the key things, and so the safe attachments, safe links, and just the extra protection you've got there with anti-phishing and things like that make it a worthwhile product, and I guess just improved spam detection and so on. So it's a no-brainer to me.
Sure. Now, what about when you look at products like Sophos, like they have like managed threat detection and that type of stuff where you're paying extra, obviously, but it almost sounds like they have either AI or really smart people behind the scenes, just like fixing things for you. I know you said that ATP, it kind of shows you where the threat came in and the path that it took and all the files it touched, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, is there a button that you can click and just roll it all back?
That I couldn't tell you, Steve, but what I can talk to is there's definitely the AI component to the Microsoft 365 security components, and that's definitely one of the things that Microsoft sell. And I guess I mean, to be completely upfront, I haven't looked at the Sophos stuff for a long time now, and I don't know exactly what their offering is. And I'm sure that it's pretty much aligned to what Microsoft offer. Where I've been convinced that going the full Microsoft stack is a better solution is that if the more information it gets, the better it gets at the threat detection. So if you put a third-party mail filtering service in front of 365, it's not getting the full picture anymore because it's going to filter things out. And so I guess I don't know what the strategy would be there, whether you would just turn off all the protection in 365 if you're using a third-party product, or still have that second layer of defense, which I think would be somewhat confusing if you didn't understand how that was working. So yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you've got to kind of pick your stack, right? And it's hard to say is one better than the other, but you've got to be comfortable with what you've chosen and why you've chosen it. And certainly, I can say that we've had good results with the Microsoft stack. Now maybe there's better stuff out there, but touch wood, we haven't had a problem yet.
Okay. Now, here in the United States, we have a lot of compliance and red tape when it comes to certain industries. Healthcare is a big one. Finance is a big one. Do you guys have, everyone, when they think of Australia, they think like, kangaroos. So like, do you guys have like regulatory compliance that you have to adhere to?
We don't have anything like what you have over there when it comes to that. Even in health, it's not. I don't believe we have anything like HIPAA. We don't look after any health clients though, so maybe there is, or maybe there is now, and I don't know about it. There wasn't in the past. I guess the biggest thing that we have here is what we call the notifiable data breach scheme, which is in some ways similar to GDPR, which is a European thing, so you might not be familiar with that. But I'm sure there's an...
We all, like, you go to any website anymore and it has those stupid, we have cookies. Do you want to accept them all? And it doesn't let you click on anything until you accept all the cookies. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
So no, we know GDPR. We hate it.
Yeah. Yep. I hear you. So notifiable data breach is somewhat similar to that. More breach focused than privacy, but essentially, if you have some kind of data breach and that exposes what PII, personally identifiable information, there is an obligation to report that and heavy fines if you don't. But you don't hear too much about that happening, and I'm not sure that people take it all that seriously. But yeah.
So you said that there's heavy fines if you don't. Mm-hmm. Are there fines or any type of consequence if you do report having a breach?
I don't believe there are. I think that if you do, you basically, if you report on a breach, you sign yourself up to a whole bunch of work, just trying to work out what's been exposed and and basically, letting the authorities know. So it's a massively time-consuming process, and best avoided.
So that sounds like the wild, wild west. It sounds like you guys have no laws. It's just figure it out as you go almost over there. Now, obviously, there you might have something like a BAA or something like HIPAA or whatever, but if you're not supporting healthcare, I guess you really don't need to be an expert on that stuff.
Well, us as a company, no. But yeah, look, the dilemma as a managed service provider is that you're talking to your clients about security and trying to get them to take that seriously. And when there's no real consequence for a security breach, then it's difficult for people to take that seriously in a lot of cases.
That's a good point. That's
a
really good point.
Yeah, and in my experience, what I found is that unless someone has a personal experience with they're having identity theft occur, or that their business actually, like, they do fall victim to some kind of phishing attack where they end up paying out money to someone that they shouldn't. Those sorts of situations will trigger a response, and then they will start to take things seriously. But basically, in Australia, we're a little bit laid back, and it's she'll be right sort of attitude, and then something happens and obviously things change. But until that happens, it can be very difficult to get through to these people, and without that regulatory kind of compliance in place, there's no real I guess there's no incentive for the business.
That's really interesting.
It is.
I'm moving to Australia. All right, now let's talk, just because I'm genuinely curious. Let's talk about anything else that you guys are doing that's not Microsoft. Like, for now, I know that Microsoft doesn't make routers, so I'm sure you have to provide some type of router, firewall, UTM, whatever you're using.
Mm-hmm.
What device do you like to use right now at your clients?
I'll circle back to that, Steve, because there are some products we use in the cloud that are not Microsoft, which are probably worth touching on too. So one thing we do is we back up 365.
Okay.
And that's debatable as to whether you need to do that or not. I was certainly of the opinion that if you've got retention in place, that you don't really need it. But that was until someone went and deleted a folder with 3,000 items in it, and we had to manually restore it from the recycle bin one by one. That was not a very enjoyable process. So you can get your data back.
So the retention lets you get it back. It just is the most painful process in the world. So you'd rather just pay extra for a third-party backup solution to make your life easier in that emergency type of situation.
100%. So yeah, it's not so much about risk as it is about just being able to do things quickly.
That recovery time objective is it's a real thing, especially, it's one thing when someone says, oops, I deleted a single file, but holy cow, if you have to restore 3,000 plus files in a folder, how many hours did it take, and did you have more than one person doing it?
So a situation like that is you run a PowerShell script, and it just goes through the files one by one and restores them. But even doing it that way, it's got to do it one at a time. So the script will sit there for hours and hours and hours just getting through that list. So it is painful. So it's best avoided. But also litigation hold on a mailbox, for example, you'll get the mail back, run an e-discovery search, no problem. But the way I kind of describe that is, so you take the scenario where someone somehow maybe your mailbox got corrupted. I don't know, but they've lost everything or a substantial amount of data out of the mailbox. Now I can go and run an e-discovery search, get all that mail back, but literally I'm going to walk up to your desk with a pile of emails without any folders or anything and be like, here's your email, off you go and put it back the way it was, kind of thing. So
Oh, wow.
it's the structure of the mailbox that you don't get. You get the data, but not the structure.
Got it. Yeah, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound helpful.
So yeah, and it just makes our techs' lives easier as well. So backup, 100%. I'd say you need that. And obviously we don't go to Microsoft for that. We go to a third party. So that's one thing. The other thing that we like to include is the cloud email signature product. We use Exclaimer for that, and we just find that's a nice little touch that the clients do really like, and it kind of makes sense to me, right? Like why don't you have email signatures in the cloud? Like everything else is in the cloud, but your email signatures aren't. So to me, that kind of completes the picture of email in the cloud. So that's a good one as well. But yeah, they're probably the two main things that are not Microsoft in our stack. And actually, one other thing I can think of is a big part of what we do, which I haven't talked about, is cloud adoption. So obviously with Teams, businesses need help getting proficient in Teams a lot of the time. And that's a service that we offer. And to augment that, we use a product called Quick Help, which is like an online learning platform designed exclusively for the 365 platform. They're also doing some other cool stuff now around security training and like simulated phishing and stuff. It's kind of moving into the security space a little bit around education as well. But to me, that's a really useful tool to have that you can give to end users and say, go off and do some Teams training. It'll just sort of help them with the basics of how to use the tool. So yeah, they're the three main things that we put in our cloud bundle that are not Microsoft. So
okay. Now, what about physical things that are not Microsoft?
So yeah, so
Computers
routers.
And, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't. I mean, we do sell computers obviously to our clients. We stick to the bigger brands, HP, and we do some Surface stuff as well, which I wouldn't say I'm a raving fan of the Surface range, but it is good. And some people love them. They're a bit sort of like, they're a bit like how people love their Mac stuff. You get these people who just love the Surface stuff. So,
right.
where we've got the authorized reseller qualification, so we can buy them and sell them, which is nice.
Nice.
And so there's that, and then obviously, like you say, there is the networking stuff, which you take the server away from the network, and all of a sudden there's a lot less complexity required there. So UTMs, I guess, they still have a place to some extent, but then it's not as important as it once was. I would say. I think if you have a router with no ports open, that's okay if they're a full cloud kind of business, because as I said earlier, I guess the biggest threat I see is the cloud identity and keeping that secure, and no UTM can really help you with that, unless I'm mistaken.
Now, that's a really, I think that's a fair approach, and I mean, another way to look at this, it doesn't matter if you have a Cisco firewall or a Sophos UTM or the modem router that came from the internet provider. If you have no ports being forwarded, then there's no like blatant holes in the network, which means at that point, if someone's trying to hack onto your physical desktops, then either they're going to do it like in person, or B, they're like a really good hacker and they're going to get around them no matter what firewall. Like if they want in bad enough, they'll get in. And I'm sure there's other ways, like, convincing someone that you're Microsoft tech support and getting on there with Screen Connect or TeamViewer or whatever. But like, if someone wants in there, they're going to get in there. And I feel like no amount of security is going to prevent every single type of breach or event or whatever you want to call security issues, right?
Well, I mean, you can have the best security in the world, as I'm sure you would know, but the biggest risk is always the user, and you can have all the best locks and security in the world, but if you leave the door open, which is essentially what an uneducated user will do, then it doesn't none of that matters. So but that's not to say you shouldn't do these things. It's just that if you think that's going to solve the problem in and of itself, of course it won't. So that end user training is really, really important. And I mean, I've seen, like, we have MFA set up across the board, and I've experienced with a client a user that's got MFA, and they've landed on one of those 365 phishing pages, put the credentials in. The person sitting on the other end of that grabbed the credentials, signed in to 365 from their machine, which triggered the MFA prompt, and immediately, and the user did it because they just thought that's just what happens. I sign in, I get MFA, and then so the attacker was just straight in the door.
Wow. I didn't even think about the fact that the attacker could be like actively watching to see if somebody is typing in credentials, so that way they can get in right away with that MFA token.
Literally, they'll get alerted the second they fill in that form, and it's probably even automated. It'll then sign into the 365 account, trigger the MFA, which the user expects to happen, and which, when the user thinks they're signing into a legitimate 365 page, they will hit the approve button on the Authenticator app, and the person's in. So,
wow.
How do you stop that? It's difficult.
Shock collars.
But I mean, look, that could happen to anyone. If you've had a long day, you're tired. It's you're not thinking about what you're doing, whatever. It's and look, we brand the 365 login page to it's a little bit of it's not really security, but it does help if they go to a 365 login page and our branding is not there. They might stop and ask the question. But we've had clients targeted with emails, sending them to fake login pages with our branding on them. Like they've taken our background image, they've put the client logo on it, they've done the whole bit. So they'll go to great lengths to get that information.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Now, is that something that those attackers are scripting? Is that possible? Go collect this information and use it?
I'm not sure I understand the question properly, Steve. I'm sorry.
So when an attacker decides they're going to go after a bunch of companies, are they able to just write a script that goes out and collects the background and the client logo and that type of stuff to brand these pages? Are they writing it into the code of the page they're designing to like detect what the background and logo is on the website, or is everything manual?
I couldn't tell you, but I'd say there's a very good chance they've automated that. Definitely. Certainly doable.
Yeah. I just want to ask one last time, if anyone in the audience that's watching live has any questions, please pop those into the chat. That way we can try and get those answered for you before we wrap up. Now, you said before that you have the software development background, and there's a lot of like stuff that you guys need to do in order to set up one of these clients. So, do you just have like a bunch of scripts or whatever you want to refer to them as? I know some programmers get a little iffy when you say I'm just writing a PowerShell script. They want to say they're coding, and it's whatever, right? So do you just have like a bunch of scripts, or did you like make a pretty interface, or like how involved is this process that you're using to set up 365 for your clients?
Yeah. So we've invested probably 2 years into what I would call kind of DevOps kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a few parts to this. So we've written our own PowerShell module. It's just the Axiom IT PowerShell module, and all of our staff have that on their machines, and that allows them to do things like connect to clients' 365 services just through our own commandlets and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've written our own commandlets to onboard and offboard users, so that process is largely automated. Integrates into our ticketing system, ConnectWise, and so on. Which we've also built our own custom client portal, so a little bit like something like Cloud Radio, but we wrote our own, and that also integrates through Graph API. So all of our forms that our that our clients fill in, they're all pulling in data from their 365 environment. So when they want to offboard a user, there's a drop down there. They pick the user they want to offboard. It's already pre-populated. They want to create a user. They select from a list of drop downs. They want to delegate access to mailboxes, things like that. It's all there, which is great. And then at the end of that, it just pushes out a little API call into ConnectWise and throws in a little PowerShell snippet that the text just run, and that takes care of the onboarding. So our onboarding process is somewhat complex because of all the things that we do in the background. But essentially all the tech does is run that script, and it will talk to our distributor, order the licenses, it'll put that into our billing system and bill the customer, and it will go provision the user, assign the license, and do all that kind of jazz. So, and then send off emails to let people know that the user's ready and here's the temporary password, and so on and so forth. So we've invested a ton of time in that, and that again would not be possible without an environment like 365 where you can actually do that. Just another one of the things that I love about it. And so there's that. So there's that I would say is sort of the day-to-day operational, automating all of those processes once a client comes on board. But of course, before you can do any of that, you've got to get the client into shape. And so for us, that means getting the tenants set up. And I guess from a client onboarding point of view, there's two parts to it. You've got to get the tenants set up, but then you've got to get the users onboarded. And the user onboarding piece is still quite manual and laborious. And generally they'll book an appointment or we'll go on site and we'll onboard the machines and we'll set up MFA and do all that kind of stuff and walk the users through that process. There's no way of automating or getting around that. And that's okay. That's the customer service stuff that we do, and that's the thing that clients love. But as far as getting the tenants set up, that is something that's highly automatable. And again, we've spent a couple of years refining that process over and over, and essentially is just pushing policies and various configuration into the tenant to get it to our standard. So we've invested a lot of time trying to streamline that as much as possible, and we've been pretty successful in that. But then I guess the other piece of that puzzle is that once a tenant is set up, is ensuring that configuration sticks, so that in 6 months' time, the settings that we put in are still there, and they're still configured the way they were on day one. That's really important. The other side of this the other consideration in all of this is that 3 years ago when we started onboarding our customers, the policies looked a little bit different than they do today, and there were probably less policies available, and there were certainly less options on those policies. So one thing we discovered a year or two into the journey was that we had all these older tenants that we hadn't actually configured a lot of the new settings on. So we had to go back and revisit those. And that continues to be an ongoing process because Microsoft iterates so quickly and add new features all the time that you've got to first figure out how to use it, or if you want to use it, and then once you decide how you're going to, or if you're going to, you then have to go back to all those tenants and update all the settings, which is quite a tedious and manual process that no one enjoys doing. So they're I guess probably some of the biggest challenges that we've run into over the last couple of years around consistency and compliance on that front. So we have sought to address that challenge as well, but in order to do that, we've developed our own product now that we're going to market with, that can help MSPs with that exact challenge that I just described around keeping your policies current and then being able to easily push that out across all of your tenants in a way that's not manual.
So the name of that product is MSP Magic. And, I asked you when I first learned about it, is this product like Simian Cloud? And I believe your answer was no, because they focus a lot more on like policies, and MSP Magic focus is more on like the administration portion of things, right?
So I would say, so my understanding is that what we're trying to achieve here and what Simian Cloud are trying to achieve are similar things. So it's about consistency and compliance. So in that sense, yes. I think that the two products approach it a little differently, and I believe that we do some things that they don't. But yeah, I guess in summary, similar challenge that we're trying to address, just different approaches to addressing that challenge.
Got it. Have you heard of Augment with 2 T's?
I have not.
AUGMENTT. This one I ran into recently, and I see that they help MSPs build and deliver profitable SaaS services.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what that actually means. You know what I mean? Like, so what's cool is I've got a meeting with them coming up, just because I'm trying to figure out what it is they do for the MSP, because I feel like it's not what you're doing. It's not what Simian Cloud's doing. I feel like it's almost completely different.
So yeah, I mean, I couldn't, without having a good look, Steve. Obviously, I don't know, but I guess there are a number of products coming into market now, looking to help MSPs automate service delivery and configuration and things like that, and it's a growing space, because I think as an MSP, if you're not approaching it this way, it's going to be very difficult to be profitable and scalable. So whether you're using a product like ours, or you use Simian Cloud, or even now Skykick have got their Cloud Manager product, which I'm sure that's a good product too.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess where the vendors are starting to put the products in front of us gives us an indication of where we need to go. And
True.
The automation and the time saving piece is critical to profitability in my mind. If you're spending hours and hours onboarding a user or things like that, which can be automated, and I think that's sort of what Skykick aims to do is help the orchestration of like onboarding a new user, creating a WebEx account for them at the same time as their 365 account or Dropbox account, and so on and so forth, and again for offboarding.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be doing that, because otherwise you'll just be you're burning time. But not only that, I feel like on the client side, particularly for us, we've set an expectation with our clients that they can come to us and they can request a new user and get that turned around same day, within an hour or two, like end to end. It shouldn't be a difficult process. Whereas I hear we pick up clients and they tell us that they have to give the current provider a week's notice and things like that, which to me is just, it's crazy. I can't understand how that would be okay. But anyway, nevertheless, so it all comes down to the consistency thing in my mind, and being able to just do, as much as I don't like to say it, but you've got to have a cookie cutter approach to what you're delivering to your clients, and having the right tools to do that is really important. And at this stage, they don't exist. And I guess where I saw the opportunity with MSP Magic is that we have RMM tools for workstations and servers, and we've had them for I don't know how long, since forever, since I've been in the game at least, and longer.
Right.
Why hasn't someone built an RMM tool for Office 365? That was the biggest question I always had. Like, surely Kaseya or LabTech or whoever enable what. This is an opportunity here to expand their offering into that space, because every MSP is doing 365. Whether that it's all they're doing or not is a different thing, but they're all doing it, and
Sure.
they need to be doing it in a way that they can make it profitable, even if it's just selling like a basic 365 hardening service that they can deliver through that consistency. They need a tool for that.
I agree. And David even said that traditional RMM vendors are conspicuously absent from this segment, and I'll agree with that. The thing that I find the most frustrating, and I've said this before in other episodes, you sit down, you look at one of the RMM tools, and you see they still have like ancient scripts in there, like to clean up the Exchange store on an Exchange 2003 server. Like we're gonna use that. Like that's so they're still running like 18-year-old technology on these RMM tools, and they're selling it to us for ridiculous prices, and we keep buying it. And that's the biggest problem, is that we just keep buying it. I do think that we need a product, and I don't know, I don't care whose product it is, and I think there should be more than one, because competition is good for free market, right? So I think that there should be stuff out there that is able to manage and monitor all of our cloud tools, and not just 365 even. I'm even thinking like there should be something that can manage 365 and G Suite and Dropbox, I'm sure there's a list of like 10 or 20 big cloud programs that are like the most popular ones used by MSPs. Just like figure out how to manage them through APIs and stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The thing is that I think that a lot of MSPs are not delivering services quite that way yet. So we're in a very slow-moving industry, has been my experience. The change takes a very long time in the MSP world, and there are good reasons for that. But innovation is slow, and so.
And I think that's ridiculous, because if you look at technology, like the technology is changing quicker than our industry for supporting that technology.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
That's not okay.
No, it's. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I could see that the our industry was way behind where the clients were going, but part of that also was. I guess Microsoft hadn't given us what we needed to do. But that's no longer the case. Microsoft 365 allows you to manage, I guess, what I call the modern world, in a way that is quite powerful. So the tools are there, the products are there to do that. But yeah, again, if you start to extend outside of that 365 infrastructure or ecosystem, it becomes a lot more difficult. And so that's part of the reason why for Axiom we've decided where we can use the Microsoft product, we will, and where we need to go outside of the Microsoft stack. So for example, a good one is like say Salesforce, right? Got a lot of clients using Salesforce. Now, Salesforce is probably the best in breed CRM, I would say. You can disagree.
I don't know.
with me,
Dynamics is pretty great.
It possibly, it is, but Salesforce have the name in the market, and a lot of people are drawn to that. So, as an MSP, we've got clients using it. So our responsibility is we've got to secure that, right? Now, I don't know how to secure Salesforce, but I do know that I can set up single sign-on with Salesforce using Azure AD, and I've already secured the Azure AD sign-in, and I've got identity protection on it, and I'm monitoring it and doing all that kind of stuff. So, we need to be doing these sorts of things for our clients where it's possible. And again, I don't think a lot of MSPs are thinking that way. They kind of go, well, we'll look after the 365, and if you're going to go and use other SaaS stuff, that's on you, and that's fine if that's in your agreement that you don't do that. Sure, but I think as a good advisor, you should be explaining to them why they should be doing the single sign-on, or why they need to pay the extra for Dropbox Enterprise or whatever it is that gives you the SSO capability into Azure AD. That's really, really important. And I know I've been burnt by that, where the client sort of decided, they were going to use Dropbox because they needed it. We weren't going to manage it. They went for the standard option without the single sign-on, and then one of the accounts got compromised. And, we'd had that discussion, and they chose not to go down the path that we advised, and it burnt them. But my neck wasn't on the line, so that was okay. But it's an interesting world, I suppose. That we're in an interesting space now, and I think if you're not doing this well, eventually it's going to catch up with you, and your clients will wise up, and they'll move on to the people who are.
Well, Taz, I thank you for coming on here and talking with us about your full Microsoft stack experience. It sounds interesting. I know that there are going to be people that hate everything about what you just said. I mean, let's be honest. And there might be people that love everything about what you just said. And that's the beauty of this industry, in my opinion, is that there are more than one way to do things.
But there's no right or wrong way, Steve. I don't think that we have.
Well, there's definitely wrong ways.
But I'm not here to say that everyone should do what we do, and that this is the only way to go. You've got to find what works for you, and you've just got to back yourself in on that. And if you can convince people that it's a good idea, and you can support it, and you get a good outcome, then all power to you.
And you are returning in a few weeks, I believe. We're going to talk specifically about MSP Magic. And the thing that excites me the most about it is, you are actively like building this thing based on the way that you are running your MSP. Mm-hmm. So like for now, it does things kind of, I'll say, just like you do them, right? Specifically the way you do them. Those are the things that you've built out first when it comes to what to manage and how to manage and that type of stuff. But I could see eventually you will just continue to add functionality to the product, so that way, again, there's more than one right way. So give us the ability to kind of design things the way that we want to.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, everyone's going to do things a little bit differently, and a good tool gives you the power to do things that you need to do, but the flexibility to do it in the way that works for you. So, which of course is part of the challenge in building a product is not making it so, I guess, you don't want it too tightly bound to the way that we do things, but it's important that that key functionality is there so that it does what it needs to do in a way that's flexible enough for everyone to use. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, Steve, and to diving into that a little bit more and explaining how the two kind of go together.
Awesome. Well, Taz, thanks again for being here. This was really helpful for me, and I'm sure it was really helpful for others. And I will see you in a few weeks. And everyone else that's watching this live, I will see you guys hopefully again tomorrow at 1, where I interview Eric Taylor, and we're going to talk about some cybersecurity hygiene. Taz, check this one out. You're in the future, so you'll have to wait extra. But yeah, definitely. Oh, actually, you've already seen it because you're in the future.
That's right.
But no, come check that out tomorrow, guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks again, Steve.